And it's a pleasure to welcome him and the attendees. Ivan Hjelmeland, is that right pronounced?
Perfect pronunciation.
From Shortcut, the leading app shipper in Nordics.
Yes.
Is that a good summary?
I think that's a perfect summary.
And Ivan has a decade of experience building apps, more than 100 native apps, and worked with many successful app store optimization projects. And he'll share more about himself, and I'm gonna hand over the mic to him. Thanks, Ivan, for taking the time and sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here as well. I would have to say that ASO has been one of the things that I've been focusing most on the last couple of 2 years. And I want to start by just telling a little bit of a story, because last week I was in Stockholm doing a presentation in front of 150 different banking apps. And out of those 150 different banking apps, I was looking at how I would find them in the App Store. So when I was searching for mortgage, or bolån, which it is in Sweden, I would figure out that there was only 2 apps listed for those keywords in the App Store. And that tells me a story that ASO is actually really important, and it hasn't had the same impact as SEO has gotten so far. The impact is big, but it hasn't had the same, like people aren't using it as much as they are using SEO. So today I will try to answer these 4 questions. So we're going to start with, what is the best app development technology to use in 2023? What is App Store optimization, or ASO? How to succeed with ASO? But also I added this other thing where, should I use in-app purchase or not? So let's just jump straight into it. What is the best app development technology to use in 2023? Now, the true answer is there is no such thing as the best technology to use. I mean, I took this photo with me as well, because it says like, oh my God, this app is so nice. It has Swift UI and it uses Combine. It's even built with MVVM architecture. Like, no user would ever say this, because they don't know, right? They don't care. They love if your app looks beautiful. They love it if it solves their problem easy, fast, making them efficient, stuff like that. But there are no such thing as the best app development technology. But I can say that, but I have to prove it as well. So let's start by this example. Can you guess the technology that is used in this app? I think the majority couldn't. The answer is that SAS recently rewrote their whole app into Flutter. But for you as a user, when you use the app, it doesn't make sense if you don't look for the right signs. But what I did was that I did like a collection of data over the last couple of 3 years. And what I saw was that for the apps in Norway and Sweden, it's close to 3,600 apps owned by Swedish or Norwegian companies. What I saw was that the majority of the apps were native. React Native was also big, Cordova, Flutter, and Xamarin. Like, those are the biggest ones when it comes to technology choices. I also added this where I also took like data from the apps that were added after 2021 to see how the trend was going. And what you can see is actually that Flutter is one of the growing ones when it comes to like the majority of apps for that type of technology. Now, take this with a little bit of a pinch of salt, I would say, because a lot of the apps that are put into the native category could also be native apps that has a lot of web content. So it's not totally true. If we dig a little deeper, I also took a look at the average rating for the different libraries or technologies that were used in these apps. And I promise you, I did actually collect all this data. It took me close to 6 months to do so, manually going in and figure out all the frameworks that were used for the apps. So I'm really happy to share it with you. But I would also say for this slide as well, take it with a little bit as a pinch of salt as well, because if you look here, you could see that Swift UI and Jetpack Compose is on top when it comes to like average rating on this slide. But I would also say that if you have people working with the newest technology on those apps, you probably have an app that has already been there for a couple of years, or you're adding a new one. And I would also say that React Native and Cordova is a little bit like negative-minded here when it is close to the bottom, but I wouldn't say that that is true at all, because if you look at React Native and Cordova apps as well, it's typically frameworks you would use for white label apps as well. So what I could see was actually the majority of white label apps were actually written in React Native and Cordova as well, which is also taking the average rating down. So take this with a pinch of salt. Now, to kind of go a little bit deeper, instead of saying what is the best tools you should use, I'm actually covering the 3 most popular ones. So I'm going to go with native first. Native has always been like the safe choice, but it's also the more expensive choice. You have to build 2 different platforms with 2 different code bases. The good thing here is that there's a lot of experienced developers. I would also say that people or app developers that are working with native kind of look at themselves as app developers, while it isn't necessarily true for the other ones. I'll come back to that one. You have to write 2 code bases, Swift and Kotlin. Usually this was Objective-C and Java. So there's been like a big transition last couple of years with a lot of technical depth for a lot of the company that chose native as well. So it's not like the only safe choice. There's still a lot of stuff happening in technology. And you know, whenever new technology arrives, there will be technical depth. Also, we usually talk about like the native feel, you know, swipe back, swipe left to go back and stuff like that. And also what we learned in Shortcut is that the Android version of apps also needs more maintenance than the typical iOS version, typically. We usually add like 10% on top of the estimates for Android versions because there is so much happening in the dependencies for Android. If you look at React Native, it's usually like the thing we think about as the fast hybrid. It's 1 code base, 2 platforms. So in theory, you could only have 1 app developer and you would be able to deploy on both platforms. It's written in JavaScript, which is a very popular language. A lot of people know JavaScript. Also, what I've seen is that a lot of full stack developers tend to go to React Native, which kind of makes sense because if you know React, for instance, as a framework, it's very typically that you can jump over and do some stuff in React Native as well. Sometimes it can be hard to debug React Native apps because you have those layers in between. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but I've seen some examples where that could be an issue, where it takes a lot of time to figure out where is actually the bug happening. There are some things where people say that there are some performance issue with React Native as well. To be honest, I would take that with a pinch of salt as well. I haven't seen that many apps that are struggling with performance these days. But there are some performance issues mentioned here and there. I would say one of the biggest downsides...
Sorry, Ivan, is there a specific category or apps that you think would experience more performance issues than others?
I would say when it comes to animations and stuff, that's probably where the things are happening the most. I mean, as app developers, we usually want to add animations as well. And for those, we've seen some performance issues, but that is not only on React Native. That could happen on Native and Flutter as well. There was a bug in Flutter recent months or a few months ago that was really like when you scrolled, it was lagging a lot. So, I mean, yeah, but when it comes to like having custom navigation and a lot of things happening on the screen at the same time, that's when you experience some performance issues. One of the things with React Native is also the dependency nightmare. If you've used npm on any project, you know that you press npm and you type npm install, and then there's 13,000 dependencies. We have seen some examples of some React Native libraries that have had some vulnerabilities that was bad, and then you have to remove it and find a replacement for a dependency, which could be a nightmare. And also, this is a question I'm raising because if you look at like what Flutter has been going through over the couple of years, I know that the Flutter community in Stockholm is pretty big. I haven't seen the same thing for React Native community, but they have the React community to rely on. So that is pretty big, but there is no like unique thing for React Native. If you know about any, please send them to me because I would love to attend. Flutter, as the last one, the new cool kid in town. I think Flutter was released in 2017. Has the same benefit as React Native, where it has 1 code base and 2 platforms. I would say that documentation on Flutter is great. It's built by Google and supported by Google, and I think they've done a great job there. It's written in Dart, which is a total new language for a lot of people, but it's also a very forward-leaning language, so it's fairly easy to get started with. As I mentioned, it's supported by Google, has a big community, a lot of events, a lot of things happening there. And they also have their own components. Now, what I would say is probably the biggest benefit of using Flutter is that you aren't that tightly connected to the native component in apps. So that means, let's say that you're supposed to create this spa feeling themed app, and you want to do it in a very different way. Then you actually have a unique opportunity to do that in Flutter, because you don't have the limitations or the components to rely on as you have in React Native and Native. So you're kind of a little bit more free. I've seen a lot of examples on the Flutter apps where they look totally different from what I'm used to when it comes to app. And I think if you want to go that way, Flutter is a great way. There is not that many experienced developers available for now, mainly because it's a new technology and there's a lot of people jumping on it. I've seen a lot of students jumping onto Flutter and get efficient really fast, but there aren't many experienced developers. I've also seen some native developers going over to Flutter as well. But yeah, I just wanted to discuss this a little bit because there are different choices you have to go through, and there isn't one that is the best one. There is always room for choosing one of them.
What does iOS and the Apple ecosystem think about Flutter?
That's a good question. I mean, Google loves Flutter. They're pushing Flutter forward a lot, while also doing the same with Android. When it comes to Apple has kind of been like this. They've always been like leaning for building native apps. They've always wanted us to do that. But they haven't been like, people said like 5 years ago that in the future progressive web apps will not be a thing. But now last year they opened up for having push notifications in progressive web apps as well. So I mean, they understand that they need people to build apps on their platform. They really want to do this thing where they kind of introduce Swift UI to make it more modern as well. So I always ask this question to people: what would happen if Android didn't release Jetpack Compose and iOS did not release Swift UI? How would the world look then? Would Flutter be much more attractive? Would it be the same? Like, I think they did a good job implementing Swift UI and Jetpack Compose, which also made them attractive as well. But I don't think like Apple is like hating on Flutter or anything like that. They want to have more people writing native apps, but they also see that there is a lot of potential in the other ones. I mean, Android and Flutter goes kind of hand in hand. Google is pushing Firebase a lot, which makes a lot of sense for them as well. So yeah, I don't think there are any strong opinions on that, to be honest. Now, let's jump a little bit deeper. What is App Store optimization? And I work in a company with 200 app developers, and I don't think 200 app developers could give a good answer on this. So it's not like everybody knows it, but it's not rocket science at all. It doesn't require one line of code. It's very, very simple as well. But there are a lot of tricks, and I'm going to share all my experience today, which I've been really looking forward to. So, I jumped on the wrong slide. Let me see. There we go. The goal of ASO is to improve visibility, increase organic downloads, and boost conversion rates. Those are the 3 primary goals of ASO. Now, the cool thing about ASO is that it's totally free. It doesn't cost you anything. It's free to do, and it's open for everyone to do as well, as long as they have an app. I put this example up there because Spotify is typically an app that everybody knows. And I did search for music app in this case. But as you can see, Spotify has translated into Norwegian, so it's at Spotify, Music, and Podcast. But ASO can be done on Apple App Store, but also on Google Play Store. So I did use Spotify as an example here. And as you can see on both left side and right side, it's basically the same. There are some different naming conventions, but you typically have a title, a subtitle, an app icon, screenshots, a description, a what's new text, and you have the ratings and the reviews. Now, Spotify is probably one of the most famous apps in the world, and they're famous for playing music. So why would they then in their title add music and podcasts? It's because people are looking for music app and podcast apps. And maybe not everybody knew that Spotify included podcast. I think it was 3 years ago or something like that. But it's a great way for them to be available when you search for music and podcast as well. Now, if you would search for a music app in the App Store, you wouldn't find Spotify as the first thing, which is a little bit interesting as well, even though it's one of the most popular music apps out there. But what we're going to do now is that we're going to go through all of these categories, or what you can adjust in ASO. I'm going to start with the first 3 ones, which is title, subtitle, and icon. So let's start with icon. The icon is actually really important because when you browse through apps in the App Store, it's the thing you see the most that gives you the most attention. So if you're looking for a music app, for instance, a red icon would be more visible than a white icon, since it's already a white background. So choose an icon that stands out and try to avoid text. I took a screenshot of my homepage here, so you can see that there's a lot of different apps there, but you can easily see that some of them stands out, and you can also see that some of them has text in it, which is a little bit hard to read when it's on such a small screen. But the general tip for ASO is to actually just make something that stands out. And I would also say one thing, this can also be A/B tested. So that means you can also have two different app icons, and you can see how they perform in the App Store. I'm coming back to that, but I think that's a really valid point as well. And the title, which is probably the most important part of ASO, because this is the thing that scores the highest when you look for an app. So in both App Store and Play Store, there is a limit of 30 characters. So use those characters smooth, like spend time on figuring out what that keywords, how you would set up the title. Now, my recommended format is having your brand name, for instance, Spotify, and then try to add 2 keywords that are important for you. For instance, if you have a meditation app and your app is named, for instance, Calm, then use Calm as the brand name, and then meditation, and something else for the keyword. Just put it up that way, because it's the most important factor for how your app is being visible when you search for apps. The subtitle is almost as important, but on the iPhone version, you also have 30 characters here. And it's really important that you don't use the same keywords as you use in the title. Don't repeat yourself. Now, most of the companies I've seen in the App Store put their slogan here. That doesn't make sense. I'm going to show you a few examples of that as well, of how that doesn't work. In Play Store or on Android, on the other hand, you have something called short description, which is basically the same as the subtitle, but it's part of the description of your app. That means you have 80 characters to play with. So be creative about it. Spend those 80 characters, because it's really valuable. To summarize those 3, app icon, title, and subtitle, I've done an example where I use an app called TV2 here in Norway. As you can see on the before, they're using the title TV2 Play, and they don't have anything on the subtitle as per now. So my example is that they should probably put sport, film, and series in the title, because it's what they want to show. Now, I've also added a subtitle, which means watch Champions League in Disney+, because if you have TV2 Play, you also get Disney+ for free in your membership, which I think is something that they should advertise. Of course, it has to comply with the agreement they have with Disney+ for this, of course, but I would highlight that as an example. I've seen a lot of examples where, for instance, a lot of the banks just put their bank name, nothing else. So if they would put like mortgage or Bolån in here, they will be visible for Bolån, and probably one of the first hitting apps if you search for apps with Bolån as well. I'm coming back to more examples on this as well. Then jump to the next important one, which is the screenshots. And screenshots is something that typically apps don't care much about, because it's something you just take a screenshot, put it out in the App Store, and you're done. You don't change it for years. That's typically how I've seen a lot of apps do it. But I wanted to show you these examples, because these are like, I searched for Bolt food here, and I got up Just Eat as an example, but also DoorDash. And if you're looking for those type of apps, the chances that you're hungry and you want to order food is probably pretty big, right? So what they've done here is they actually added photos of a big chicken burger and also Coca-Cola and fries on the DoorDash one. And I think that is really clever, because when you're going through all these apps and you see this, then like, oh, I have to try this one. And they can also write things here as well. I would say for the Just Eat one, they probably added a little bit of a small text here, which is a little bit hard to read, as you can see. So they could probably improve by having a bigger font or a bigger text as well. Now, on the iOS version, when you search for apps, as in this example, the 3 first screenshots shows up when you browse through apps. So the first 3 screenshots are also the most important. They aren't visible the same way in Android. You actually have to click into the app to see it in the Play Store. But on iOS, the 3 first one are the most important ones. I also added something here which says that you can show a video here. Now, showing a video here is great if you have a game or something like that where you can showcase how the app is working. But if you're not good at video editing, I would not recommend you do that. If you do that, if you have any editors that can help you with it, feel free to do it, but make it less than 30 seconds because people don't watch those unless they are entertaining. Continuous delivery. This is basically on the update part of the app. I would say the recommendation from my side is probably to update your app very often. And the main reason for this is that if you have updates that are frequent in the App Store, Apple and Google are also prioritizing you when it comes to ASO. That is one key factor. The other key factor is that all the changes that you are going to do in ASO needs an update to be visible in the App Store. So the more frequent updates you have, the more chances you have to experiment with keywords and titles and icons and stuff like that. So just make sure you have regularly updates. Doesn't have to be 12 a year, could be 4 a year. The general thing I've seen is that typically an app in App Store in Norway and Sweden has a new version every 3 months. Some have every week as well.
Is there, sorry, Ivan,
No worries.
to jump in. Is there because I've heard of situations where people have been waiting for a long time before their update push gets accepted. Like, is there some like best practices there that you could share?
Yeah. So this was more of an issue in earlier days of app development. So, I mean, a few years back, we had this Twitter channel which said Apple review times, where developers would update the amount of days it took for an app to get reviewed. But nowadays, it's usually done within the first 24 hours. App Store do have, however, they're more strict than Google Play. Google Play has a lot of automation in it, so you don't have to be that strict when it comes to Google Play. But for App Store, their team has also some vacations every now and then. So for instance, from 21st of December until 1st of January, it's pretty hard to get an app update out there unless you're a prioritized customer by Apple. So just make sure that you follow those yearly life cycles as well. And I've seen some struggles where if you publish an app on a Friday, it doesn't get updated until Monday, for instance. But yeah, it usually takes less than 24 hours these days.
Got it. Thanks.
Keywords, this is for iOS only, and it's probably one of the things that is tightly connected to ASO, because this has one. So you put like a list of 100 characters, which is a comma-separated list with keywords you want to target. So this is probably the only one that is tightly connected to ASO from Apple's side, but it's not the most important one, which is a little bit funny as well. Now, what I would say here is that don't repeat yourself from the keywords that you're using in your title and your subtitle. That's really important. Don't waste those keywords in this section here, and make a comma-separated line with characters and avoid any spaces, because they're just taking up air or space that you could use for keywords instead. I put an example here for the TV2 Play app. And as you can see, this is a tool, an ASO tool. There's like a lot of them. This one is named Chipmunk. But there's a lot of them. So all of them are doing the same thing. So you can choose whatever you like. But it's a great way to track how your keywords are performing. So as you can see here, there is a keyword, but there's also a ranking on the right side of it, which says basically what number of app, the ranking your number is listed when you search for this term in that country. So for instance, TV2, which I showed you, when you search for film, they're listed as app number 20. So if you're looking for an app that shows film, you're not going to scroll down to the 20th app to find one, right? So it's nearly impossible for them to be active on this one. But as you can see, for streaming service and TV2 Play and TV2, they're actually ranked as number 1. So you really want to have 4 or 5 keywords that are ranking you as number 1. That is like the primary goal.
How, just to connect to the previous slide, how did Bolt or how did the Fedora and the other examples get exposed when you search for Bolt? Like is it because of the food keyword, or like could you give me like a?
It could be the food keyword, but it could also be that they're adding Bolt, because it's like the Apple guidelines says that you're not allowed to use competitive keywords in the keywords section. But if you look at these ASO tools, you can actually see that a lot of they are doing that. And typically for those type of app names, they're also usually very short. So to spend like 4 characters to have Bolt in there if you're a food delivery service makes a lot of sense. So, but they do this to each other. So it's not like anyone is going to sue each other or anything like that. It's a competitive game. But they do this, and it's very easy to track if they do so or not. Good question, though. On Android, however, or Google Play Store, we don't have that keywords. But all the words you are listing in the long description of your app impacts how your app is visible. So instead of having like text with keywords, you can add those words into your text. And here comes a lot of like, this is not like an answer with 2 lines below, because this is also like, people are like skeptical, thinking how can this be solved and stuff like that. But what we've seen, the people who are working in ASO, is that if you have keywords that you use 4 to 5 times each in the text, you're getting much more visibility on them. If you have them more than 4 to 5 times represented, you're actually getting lower visibility on those keywords, because that feels like it's spamming in a way. So make sure you spend those 4,000 characters limit on the long description and use keywords that are natural to you. And on Android, you can repeat yourself. I think that's a little bit important as well. I have a summary slide where I have all the things I'm saying now also summarized in a slide, just so you should remember it. But I think in general, Android, repeat yourself as much as you want, but keep it to 4 to 5 times each keyword in this text. Also, one thing I added as a little side note as well, paste your terms of service links and privacy policy links in here as well, because the connection between Google Play Store and the websites itself is also connected to SEO. So we've seen that if you connect those two, it's actually easier to find your app as well. Rating and reviews. This is a strange thing as well. I've seen a lot of apps going out there having really bad ratings. This is an example of an app called Plattform in Stockholm. And one of my favorite review of all times is the one on the upper right corner. This app makes me regret having children, which I think is a really good review for that app. But I would say, like in general, I would look at ratings in the App Store as also take it with a pinch of salt, because it's not necessarily that your app is bad. It could also be that your service is bad. We've seen this with an example of an app named Cutters, where they have a lot of bad reviews saying like the haircut I got was really bad, which is not connected to the app at all. It's the service basically. So you could have a bad service, a really great app. You could also have the opposite way around. But I mean, would you bring your family to this if it was a restaurant? I probably don't think you will. So try to have a good rating if it's possible. Now, rating and reviews is also funny. I've collected a lot of data. So what I've seen is when I collected the data for 3,269 apps in Sweden and Norway, I saw that there is a correlation between how many ratings you have and the average rating. So the more ratings you have, the higher average rating you should have. So I divided them into iOS and Android here, coming a little bit back to that. But what I've also seen is that the average rating for apps in Norway says that iOS has a lot of higher ratings than higher ratings than the Android version. And if you think about this, it's not easy to get an answer on that. But what I've seen is that for iOS, which is not possible on Play Store, you can actually You can remove the rating. You can start from scratch. So you can start from scratch, just removing all the ratings you have, start from 0 again. You cannot do that on Android. And that is the reason why you have much more iOS versions with higher rating as well, because they can reset it. That was the word I was looking for. Now, the correlation between a higher average rating with the more ratings you have is also proven here. This is an example of an app I helped out in Norway, where they had an average rating on the iOS version on 3. And then I started in the app asking the users for a review. And it automatically just skyrocketed up to 4.5. And the reason for this is probably the same as when you look at restaurants. Because if you're satisfied with a restaurant, you don't go into Google Play and give them a 5-star review, would you? But if you're unsatisfied, you would probably go in there and give them a 1-star and write it. Makes total sense to me, at least. So my recommendation is ask for reviews, but make sure you do it at the right time. Don't do it whenever they open the app, like, hey, review my app, but do it after they've done some sort of action in the app that kind of helped them. For instance, ordering a food or getting food delivered, or they actually got some information they were looking for. but ask for reviews. It's really, really important if you want to have a high average rating in the App Store. And also back to this one, if you see here school platform, I haven't replied to any of these. Make sure that you reply, because this is actually an invitation for you. And I always tell a lot of companies that I work with, this is an invitation for you to talk about your roadmap, what you would like to do differently and stuff like that. Because people, when they're looking for your app and if they're considering using it or not, they will probably look for the 1 stars and see what you're doing bad. And if they see that you're replying with, you know what, we're actually fixing this now. Thank you for your feedback. It's actually much more valuable than a 4-star with a thumbs up. Some more examples. I did show you the TV2 when it came to like the subtitle and the title earlier. Now, what I want to show you here is that this is actually a very bad example of ASO. They didn't use any keywords, as I mentioned before. As you can see, they have a subtitle here, which is directly translated "stream you away," which is basically their slogan. But if you go into the Norwegian language, you will see that stream or strøm actually means the same as electricity. So if you look for an electricity app in Norway, you will actually find TV2 Play, which is stupid by itself, but it's a little bit funny. But I took a look at one of their competitors, which is basically Viaplay, which I think you are familiar with in Sweden as well. Now, they've done the same as I suggested for TV2 earlier. They've added film, TV, and live sport, but they also added in the subtitle Formula 1 and Premier League. Now, this is really clever. If you have people that are looking for Formula 1 apps or Formula 1 in general, getting listed that high up there, meaning that you can show those type of episodes for Formula 1 as well, or seasons, I think that's a fantastic way to get new people discovering your app as well. Now, what we can also learn from Viaplay is that they're actually benefiting from a lot of different things. Since they're targeting F1 or Formula 1 as a keyword, they've also been put into a collection, which is F1 apps by Apple. Now, Apple is doing this because Viaplay is targeting this. And being part of the collection is also something that makes your app much more discoverable. Imagine being a startup, having a software out there, and then all of a sudden Apple is highlighting your app in a collection. And the funny thing here is that Viaplay is actually listed before the official Formula 1 app as well, which I think is really nice for them. They're also benefiting from something that is fairly new in the App Store, which is the in-app events. So here they're actually showcasing that, hey, this Saturday we will actually show the Chelsea-Arsenal game. And in theory, if you would search for Chelsea or Arsenal in the search field on the App Store, you would actually find this in-app event as well. So it's a very clever way, totally free, takes less than 5 minutes to set up. So I'm going to show a few more examples of that as well. But I did the same analysis for TV2. So I showed you earlier the title and the subtitle, but I also did a change in the screenshot as well. So just my thing here is that spend some time here. If your marketing team hasn't been involved at all in the App Store listing, you're probably doing something wrong. They should be should put some attention here as well. I've seen a lot of companies having great websites, horrible screenshots on the App Store. But this is a great way to actually showcase what you do. Also for the in-app events, I told TV2 that you should probably do this as well. Put up like a new season of a TV show that is really popular, put it up there. It takes you 5 minutes, could potentially give you a lot of users. Now, I've experimented with this, and I've seen a lot of new users coming in from those in-app events, because you can actually track that as well in the App Store Connect. And Google doesn't have one similar today, but this is a fairly new thing in App Store. So if I know Google correct, they will probably have that implemented soon on Google Play as well. Same goes with this one. This is for a Swedish company where I sent them a suggestion as well. You need more space. We now have over 1,400 apartments available in Stockholm, more than 100 square meters. Just a great way to show the content you have in the app and make it more visible to users as well. Not only like new users, but also like existing users. And also I added this one, a few hidden ASO gems. Localize. This is probably one of the most important but also hidden gems of all times when it comes to ASO. I was so surprised when I figured this out 6 months ago. But if you look at the table on the right side, you can see that Sweden and Norway are listed with 2 different languages. So for Sweden, the Swedish language is the primary language, while the English is the secondary language. For Norway, English is the primary language and Norwegian is the secondary language. And the reason for this is that Apple has seen that in Sweden, a lot of Swedes are searching for apps in Swedish. But in Norway, people are searching in English, which is a little bit strange. But that's why they also supported both languages. And in the US, you can see that there are actually 10 different languages, because there's so many multicultural and multi-languages there that they have to support that when you search for an app. Now, the benefit you have from this is that if you localize your App Store listing into these countries, you will get, for instance, in Sweden and Norway, double amount of keywords to play with, double amount of subtitles to play with, and double amount of titles. And it will only impact your search keywords in a good way. So that means, for instance, on the TV2 one, I could have film, TV, and series in the Norwegian one, and then I could have sport, I could have tennis, I could have Formula 1 on the English one, and I would have double amount of keywords to play with. If you're targeting the US population, make sure you make it for 10 different countries or languages, because then you will also get 10 times the amount of keywords. And also, if you translate it into Chinese, you don't have to use Chinese words in the listing. You could use 10 times English as well. Just keep that in mind, because it's a great way. I've seen great results of doing this on different apps. So this is a truly hidden gem. And also, when there are keywords and you're kind of a new company going into the App Store as well, I would really advise you to spend those $100 promotional code you get in Apple Search Ads. Because what you can do in Apple Search Ads is you can target one keyword. So for instance, in this example I've shown on the left side, I'm searching for gardening, and then there is this app called Garden, which is fairly new, which is targeting this keyword through this Apple Search Ads. So that is an ad you can see there. But it's a great way to boost a certain keyword you want to get highlighted for. Just a great way, just spend those.
Yeah, sorry to jump in. We have 5 more minutes before we go into the Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you. And then another hidden thing as well, App Store marketing tools. Just Google App Store marketing tools and Apple has created this for you. It's basically a place where you don't even have to log in. You can just put up an app and you can start creating marketing material that you can use on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, or wherever, or as ads. They've kind of like just created this tool for you to make it easy for you to put it out in every different language. So you don't have to use like Photoshop or Canva to do it yourself. You can just rely on Apple. Doesn't look that great if you have good designers, but if you don't have good designers, it's a very easy and cheap way to get something out there for free. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Product Hunt, but I've been using Product Hunt for a while. Now, what I've seen is that when I put things out there, there's a lot of journalists and stuff just waiting for things to write about. So it takes close to an hour to put something out there, but the value you can get from it, it's like endless. You could have like a lot of things happening. I've seen this. I've also seen some apps that not getting any attention at all, but I've also seen some apps being like really, really lucky with the people who found it and just shared it all over. The same goes with this little trick, soft launch your app as a paid app. So the first version of your app should be paid. You can put the amount you want yourself, like it could be $100, for instance. But the first few days, and then change it to free. There's a lot of different engines, article, websites, just listening for apps that goes from paid to free. And then they're launching this and then sharing them with a lot of users. So this is an example from one of my apps. It's called Gym King. I did this trick when it was actually relaunched in the app. I didn't get a lot of users, so I put it to paid, set it to free 2 days later, and there was this IDB website that wrote about it, and I got 10,000 downloads in 1 day. So this is also a great trick when you want to soft launch an app and you want to get some users. So we have a few minutes left. I'm going to cover really fast if you should use in-app purchase or not. The good thing about in-app purchase is that it's fairly easy to use. It's very easy to set up. You have a lot of templates. You can configure the product in the App Store. You can have marketing campaigns and a lot of stuff. Refunds and communication around that is all handled by Apple and Google. So you don't have to do that yourself. They can just fix it for you. But Apple and Google are taking 30% commission of the price you put in the App Store and Google Play. They can support promo codes, trial periods, promotions, and every purchase is connected to the user's Apple ID or Google Play account. So you don't even need to have a user account for that user. You can connect them if you want to, but it's a great way to support purchases in apps, but they take 30% commission. Now, what I would say, though, is that this is also a little bit of a hidden gem. But if you are a company that earns less than $1 million a year, you can apply to join the App Store Small Business Program, which gives you a 15% commission rate instead of 30%. So this is really valuable for a lot. And if you go outside this, if you earn more than $1 million a year, you would just be kicked out of the program and then get 30% commission of the whole year that you were in there.
How difficult is it to apply?
Takes 2 minutes, and usually if you have a company and they see that everything is okay, it's done in a few days. So I've done this at least 20 times this year for companies. It's fairly easy. And it's also just named Apple App Store Small Business Program. Let me see. And I would also say this is a little trick that I also learned along the way. But if you're not sure about what pricing you want to take, make sure that your payment wall has this step. So this is from one of my own apps, where I kind of show what you get if you upgrade to premium. And then I have a button that says, I want to upgrade, and a button that says, not now. Now, what you can learn from this is you can actually see who are interested in upgrading, but then when you show them the paywall, you can see if they decide to go for it or not. Because if you have a lot of people that wants to buy your product, but they're not satisfied with the price, you will see that they will probably drop off here. So this is a great way if you're not satisfied with the pricing or you're unsure about what you can take. This is a place where you can A/B test a lot, and it's just one more view in a way. I'm also experimenting a lot with paywalls. I told Sebastian I would cover paywalls in this presentation, but it's such a big topic. So I did this thing. This is my own app. So the last one, the old paywall had a conversion rate of 15.1. I did some changes based on the best practices for paywalls. The conversion rate now has gone up to 24 in 3 months. So that's a dramatic change, and it's basically the same app, it's just a different paywall. So make sure you nail your paywall. And of course, I would love to come back and talk about paywall in the future. But yeah, as per now, this is what I had on paywall. And we're getting close on time, so I only have this slide left, which is basically the ASO cheat sheet. So this is everything I've said for App Store and Google Play kind of summarized, like an executive summary, with the different recommendations that I had. But also look at the bottom. Remember to measure, A/B test, experiment, and learn. Adjust 3 to 4 times a year, because you can see dramatic differences by changing a few things here and there. Whew, that was a lot to cover in 45 minutes. And then questions.
Awesome. Really good, valuable, helpful insights. Thanks so much, Ivan. While we jump into the Q&A session, as I promised, I'll push a quick poll in order to know what you think. It's anonymous, and it's only for us to know and to learn what you think and how we can improve. So make sure you answer the poll. That will be really helpful. While you're doing it, yes, let's jump into the Q&A. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just unmute and then jump into the conversation. Daniel, do you want to start? You have unmuted.
Yeah, absolutely. I was waiting to raise the hand there, but I'll just jump in. So first off, great. This was super useful for us. A lot of new things. And a quick question. So alternative to like paywalls and 30% commission is to have them sign up somewhere else. But I think Apple really hates that. So what's kind of the play around that? Like, say we don't want to give 30% to Apple. What's our best play to not doing that?
Yeah, there are some regulations where in-app purchase is mainly if you offer something that the user can benefit from in the app itself. So I mean, the biggest discussion here is probably like Spotify, that has been in a challenge with Apple for a long time, saying that, but you could also benefit the music outside the app. So can we not just have like avoid the 30% commission from you, because Spotify is something you enjoy not only on your phone. It's a different thing.
Yeah.
So what they kind of agreed on was that Spotify is allowed to have subscription outside the App Store, but you're not allowed to purchase that subscription in the app, and Spotify is not allowed to point at the website where you can do that. So that means Spotify has to support both in-app purchase and also their own subscription, and they're not allowed to advertise for that on the outside. Now, I've seen a lot of example on this, especially on B2B solutions, for instance, Microsoft Office, where they have like their private license, which you can pay in a purchase. And then they have this question, do you want an enterprise pricing? Please reach out to us, or something like that, which is a total different mindset, where you can also have the user go outside and pay for the purchase on the website, for instance. So, I mean, the in-app purchase is a little bit regulated by Apple, and it's fairly easy if you're considering providing something in the app to read through the regulations of in-app purchase to see, like, are we allowed to do this or not? But it depends a lot on what you offer. I'm not sure if I answered your question as good as I wanted to.
Spotify is kind of a good example. So basically, you could have something on your website where you sign up for an account, and you can use that, like Slack or something. You already have your Slack account, you're paying for it.
Yeah.
You can install that, but you're not going to buy Slack from the app, basically.
Exactly.
But then the problem is you can't just redirect them to the website to sign up on the account.
Yeah. But what Apple did consider, though, was that if let's say that you didn't have an app today, and you have a lot of customers on your website, then those are allowed to actually just go over and have the premium functionality in the apps. So you're not restricted that way.
Exactly. So you can have like, here, just sign in with your user, and then you're fine, basically.
Exactly. So yeah, but there are different ways of doing it. Yeah, I've seen a lot of examples where they have like an onboarding on the website, and then they point you to the app afterwards. So yeah, but you're not allowed to point them directly to the website from the app if you support something that could, in theory, be done in a purchase.
Got it. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Nice question. Thanks, Daniel, for that. Who else wants to jump in?
First of all, thank you for the presentation. It's been very helpful. I wanted to ask you if there is any tool to see, or to just have some better information, what kind of keywords people are searching on Play Store or App Store.
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. So there are a lot of ASO tools out there, and they're all using the same data source for everything they do. And in that data source, you have like typical like traffic for a keyword. So you can see like how much is the traffic here. And that's basically a scale from 0 to 100. So it's a little bit strange, but at least you can have some sort of knowledge. Like if it's 30, you know it's not that popular, but if it's 70, it's very popular. So this changes all the time as well. So for instance, the keyword Barbie is much searched for right now, because Barbie is like a hot topic right now. But on other terms, you can see this. But all the ASO tools, they will basically do the manual job for you. So if you want to see like what apps are listed in my country, if I search for instance, a music app, then you would see like the list you get is a ranking. So the first app you see is basically ranking number 1. The 20th is ranking number 20. But these ASO tools will just show it for you, and then add some information, for instance, like the traffic, the popularity of the keywords and stuff like that. There are also some tools, for instance, App Any, which is now called Data AI, that has some more information on top as well, where they kind of collect this from the developers, that can show you some more insights as well. But I would say any ASO tool, if you want to track keywords, are good ASO tools. I showed one which is called Chipmunk, which is created by a friend of mine. I use that one. It's fairly easy. And I can also play around and see how my keywords are performing. But there's so many out there, so I don't have a recommendation for which one to use, because I think there are thousands of them. Find one that you think is fun to work with. And they usually have like a trial period as well.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Great question, Resart. Anyone else wants to jump in?
I have one more, a quick one. On
Go for
the
it.
technology side, we've been using hybrid apps, so like a pure web app that's packaged as native. I think it's Ionic and Capacitor, and it's been very productive, and people haven't complained. I'm curious if that's anything you looked at. It's a little bit like the Cordova, but newer stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like the different technology choices, I would say that some of the Ionic apps are even wrapped in Cordova. So it's a little bit strange to say if it's like an Ionic app or if it's actually Ionic wrapped in Cordova. But we've seen that a lot of these technologies are used. And I think if you have people on board that are familiar with the language and they can write things and they trust it, go for it. If you have people that are comfortable with it, just go for it. I've seen a lot of different apps spending a lot of time building great web views that are doing really well. So, I mean, there is still no best choice on what to do. But if you have people that are familiar and they love to do what they do, let them do it. I think that is the general approach. I have, though, seen, I can probably inform you about how many Ionic apps or apps that I've seen that has the Ionic framework in the app. But sometimes it's also hard because a lot of the web views don't actually show what frameworks they're using when I open up the apps. So that's probably, the number I will give you is probably not correct. Yeah. So that app would probably fall into the category of native, which I say is not totally true that so many apps are native because they're just wrapped in a native wrapper, and then you have a lot of web views inside.
Yeah, that describes us. We're doing pure web work, but you can access Face ID and kind of all the native stuff, but you're not going to see Ionic in there.
Yeah.
Good. But then I know that's actually in the native part of your slides there.
Yes, for the categorization I did, then your app will probably be listed in the native one. There were also some that I could see very easily that didn't use any of the native libraries. It was only like no libraries at all. Then I would just discard them from the chart at all, just to make sure I didn't put a lot of them in the native one. So for instance, your app, if you used Face ID, you were probably using the Face ID library from Apple or Google. And then you probably had that in, so that will probably categorize you into the native apps, yes.
Nice. Rava, do you have any questions?
No questions. Thanks for asking.
No worries. So while you guys spend a minute, also Zlatan, feel free to jump in if you have any questions. I was wondering, because you mentioned A/B testing a couple of times, what's the best practices or like the recommended tools? Is there like something built in, or like what's in the standard playbook?
Yeah, good question. So A/B testing is something that is fairly new in the AppStore Connect. It's actually been in Google Play for a while. They actually had it before Apple. But it was launched, I think, in late 2021 or early 2022. So it's not that new in the App Store. But you have everything you need in the App Store. But what I would say is that if you go in there and you start digging into like how the A/B testing are working, you can actually see that you can also benefit from building custom product pages, which is basically for this particular keyword. If people are searching for this keyword, I want them to only see these screenshots, which is really good because if you have, like, for instance, TV2, if you want to have like people who are searching for sports apps or Champions League or Premier League or something like that, showcasing only sport things or sport related stuff together with other stuff would probably be a benefit if you want to target those users. So A/B testing in general is fairly easy to set up. I think the biggest effort you need to do to A/B test is actually that you have to create a lot of screenshots and a lot of app icons and put them in there. But it's really like drag and drop, and you can customize it however you like. You can, for instance, say that I have 3 different custom product pages. I want to test all 3 of them. After 3 months, give me an update, and I can see which one is performing well, and then choose that one as the one you would continue with, for instance. So everything is in the ecosystem of Google Play and Apple Connect, App Store Connect. And it's fairly easy to get started with.
Nice, really good answer. Thanks for that. Feel free to jump in, anyone. Otherwise, I have another question as well that I can ask if no one else wants to jump in. Okay, so when it comes to a lot of the description and the keywords that you're mentioning, is it possible now I'm gonna like obviously address the elephant in the room, so to speak. What can I ask an AI to generate for me? Right? Are the LLMs modern enough or trained enough that I can just ask them to spit out like a good description, or like is it more hands-on than that?
I mean, I've been doing this a lot with ChatGPT 3.5 and also 4, and I've seen that 4 is actually much better at giving me like the good keywords that I want to target, but that is probably not like rocket science or anything surprising by that. But I would say that when you're going to do the localization as well, and for instance, you're going to put an app out in Brazil in Portuguese, you probably don't know the search terms. So instead of using Google Translate, actually using an LLM instead makes a lot of sense. So I've been doing that a lot. But what I've also been doing is that I've made ChatGPT, for instance, make me a lot of keywords, and then I track them beforehand, because then I can actually see. So if I use the ASO tools, I can actually see how they're performing and what apps are tracking them and targeting them. And it's a great way. If you combine those two, you can actually figure out what keywords you should target and how many of them are easy to target as well, because the ASO tools can also tell you that.
Thank you so much, Ivan, for that answer. We have 1 more minute, and unless someone has a last question that they want to bring up, I'm gonna take the last seconds to promote our upcoming workshops. We have one coming up in November, which is qualified employee stock options and some updates on taxation and regulation in Sweden. KPMG is gonna host that one. And then we have one in December on employment law that's going to be hosted by a legal partner of ours, and that we cover also non-European citizens, because employing them in Europe is getting a little bit more complex at this point. And that we'll be addressing and talking about that. And then we're going to do another session on SEO actually in January, I think, but more on that later. Thanks so much, Ivan, for taking the time and hosting us and sharing your insights. And thanks everyone for jumping in. As always, we'll upload this to the platform. And if you scan that QR code, you actually end up at the platform on Shortcut's actual exclusive offer to you guys. So make sure you check it out, and reach out to Ivan if you have any thoughts or questions. And yeah. Any final words, Ivan?
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure being here. I could probably do this for 8 hours in a row, because this is the things that are closest to my heart. So it was a pleasure sharing it with you. Thank you so much for attending.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day now. See you all around.
Thank you very much. Awesome.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.